Prime Minister Narendra Modi, Biden has described the ties between the two nations as the most defining relationship of this century. A debris field has been discovered by an underwater robot that was searching near the wreckage of the Titanic for the missing submersible with 5 people on board. The United Nations has put the Russian military forces and its affiliated armed groups to its list of shame over violation of children's rights in the conflict during the war in Ukraine. And struggling with the rising inflation and a cost of living crisis, the United Kingdom has now hiked its key lending rates to 5%, while Turkey has raised its key lending rates to a staggering 15%. All right, so this, of course, is the big moment. The Indian Prime Minister arrived at the White House to an electrifying atmosphere just a little while back. And after addressing the crowd, both the head of the state of the United States and the head of the government in India began their highly awaited bilateral talks. Both leaders will also be addressing members of the press after the talks. Now, New Delhi and Washington are expected to deepen their defense ties and technology cooperation. Now, all of this was something that was, of course, expected well in anticipation, well before the visit began. But what is to be headlined at this moment is the manner in which the United States is approaching its ties with India, where President Biden has gone on to state that the India-US ties will redefine the 21st century. Now, minutes before beginning the top-level bilateral meeting, both the leaders, in fact, addressed the crowd that was gathered at the South Lawn of the White House. Hundreds of members of the Indian-American diaspora had lined up outside of the South Lawns to get a glimpse of the Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi. Addressing the crowd of the White House, President Joe Biden spoke about the impact that the Quad has had on the world.
With your partnership, we've invigorated and elevated the Quad between the United States, India, Australia, and Japan to advance our vision of a free, open, secure, and prosperous Indo-Pacific. Decades from now, people will look back and say the Quad bent the arc of history toward global good, as the Prime Minister describes it.
All right, some pretty strong words there. The arc of history will be bent by Quad towards greater global good. Now, the Indian Prime Minister also extended his gratitude for the Bidens to host him. He further said that the India-US ties prove the power of democracy.
Friends, भारत और अमेरिका दोनों के समाज और व्यवस्थाएं लोकतांत्रिक मूल्यों पर आधारित है। दोनों देशों के संविधान उसके पहले 3 शब्द, और जैसा राष्ट्रपति बाइडेन ने भी जिसका उल्लेख किया, वी द पीपल, हम दोनों देश अपनी विविधता पर गर्व करते हैं। हम सर्वजन हिताय सर्वजन सुखाय इस मूलभूत सिद्धांत में विश्वास रखते हैं।
डिप्लोमेटिक दृष्टि से जब किन्हीं दो देशों के बीच संबंधों की बात की जाती है तो अक्सर औपचारिक जॉइंट स्टेटमेंट, वर्किंग ग्रुप्स और एमओयू उसी के दायरे में आमतौर पर बातचीत होती है। इसका अपना महत्व है ही, लेकिन भारत और अमेरिका के रिश्तों का असली इंजन हमारे मजबूत पीपल टू पीपल संबंध है।
And just a few hours ago, the White House also said that India has decided to sign the Artemis Accords. Now, the Accords bring like-minded nations together on civil space exploration, and as per a US official, NASA and ISRO are developing a strategic framework for human spaceflight cooperation this year. And this is in an effort to send a joint mission to the International Space Station in 2024. And India's Hindustan Aeronautics has also signed a landmark deal with the GE Aerospace. Now, the MOU includes potential joint production of GE Aerospace's F414 engines in India. Now, the engines will be co-produced in India to power the Tejas light combat aircraft. Hindustan Aeronautics previously had said that it plans to use the engine for a second generation of light combat aircraft. Now, President Joe Biden and the First Lady Jill Biden had welcomed the Prime Minister at the White House on Thursday. And Washington is, of course, looking to solidify its ties with New Delhi in a move to offset China's strategic diplomatic maneuvering and also its military aggression. And sometime from now, the Indian Prime Minister will also be addressing the joint session of the US Congress, which will make him the first ever Indian Prime Minister to address the US Congress not once but twice. The Indian Prime Minister will also conclude his day with a state dinner at the White House that will be hosted by the Bidens. The historic state visit by Prime Minister Modi is expected to be a turning point for the US-India ties. The two leaders will also be signing a maritime deal. This will allow for American naval ships. Mark these words, American naval ships in the region will now be allowed to stop at Indian shipyards for repair work. And this is part of Washington and New Delhi's agenda to modernize their defense cooperation. All right, now to give us more updates in terms of what this relationship, of course, means, we're being joined in by our correspondent Susan Tehrani, who's joining us live on this broadcast. Susan, there is much that is going to be written and spoken and analyzed in terms of what this, of course, means, this meeting between the two leaders. But in terms of the statements that have been made by both of them, the camaraderie and also the optics that came out of that joint address by both the leaders in the lawns of the White House, what is clear is that the United States looks at its relationship with India very, very seriously, where Biden, in fact, went on to describe it as the relationship that will define the 21st century.
Yeah, and those were words that were also previously echoed by Jake Sullivan as well, really saying that this is a relationship that will define the 21st century prior to Prime Minister Modi's visit to Washington. And it's very transparent where the United States stands. It needs a partner and an ally in the Asia-Pacific, and a democracy like India, where there are shared values between the two countries, albeit they do have some differences, is the United States understands that it's of great strategic value. So also, there's the aspect of peeling India away from Russia. While the United States has said that it doesn't have any problems with India buying Russian gas as long as it's at a very low under cap price. However, the optics of that for the United States is very important in the international community, that to show that the United States and India are on the same page on a lot of issues, despite the fact that India has its own relations with Russia. That's very important as well. And then we can't underestimate the fact that this is an election year for Joe Biden. Politics are domestic. There are some 5 million Indian Americans in the United States. They are, a lot of them, in swing states. They go to the ballot box, and they're watching this meeting very carefully to see how Joe Biden is working with the leader of their home country. So, these are some of the aspects of the importance of the two talking to each other and meeting. Yeah.
Absolutely, indeed. And we, of course, expect to hear more from them in just a bit from now. And we've also got my colleague Molly Gambhir, who's also joining us live from Washington, D.C. Molly, we just witnessed, the romance and the camaraderie between the two leaders. And this is such an important visit, both for the Indian Prime Minister and also for the American President Joe Biden, in terms of how they would like to take the India-US equation forward. And it was not just about defense ties, but also a lot was spoken about people-to-people connect. And the United States appears to have pulled off all stops. Now, the United States is planning to open 2 more consulates. It's also changing its visa rules as well. Tell us as to how the United States of America wants to take the people-to-people contact bit forward.
Indeed, Sally, I'm reminded of what the U.S. National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan said earlier, that a number of deliverables from the Indian Prime Minister's U.S. state visit are not just bullet points on a paper. It's a lot more than that. The visit is about people-to-people ties. It's about deepening the trust between the two sides. Also, when it comes to lifting of barriers as far as sharing of technology is concerned, ISET has also been called as a way to go beyond sharing of technology and forging closer relationships between businesses in both the countries. So the overarching theme, of course, has been to deepen the relationship between the two sides, and it's a multifaceted relationship as the defense cooperation, when it comes to sharing of technology, when it comes to people-to-people ties. All of these have been talked about in the run-up to the visit as well. When it comes to specifically the potential that the two sides have, when it comes to the realization that America has at this point, when it comes to reaching out to India and needing India's assistance in countering China. On the other hand, India sees the United States as a trusted partner and a source of defense cooperation, which can only grow by leaps and bounds from here onwards, given the fact that the two sides are laying a lot of emphasis on the lifting of barriers, which the Initiative on Critical and Emerging Technology also focuses on. Also, we've seen the way in which the Indian Prime Minister, his equation with the US President Joe Biden has also been talked about. They have met multiple times, but the rapport that the two leaders shared earlier as well, when the president was talking about the popularity of the Indian Prime Minister here in the United States. So all of these have been facets that have been spoken about in great detail, and the key outcomes will not just be through that joint statement, but it is going to be a lot of symbolism also that comes along with this visit.
Absolutely, indeed. Molly, do continue to stay on with us. Meanwhile, I'm told that we're also being joined by Siddhant Civil, who's also joining us live on this broadcast. Siddhant, in some time from now, we'll see the Indian Prime Minister address the joint sitting of the Congress. And he's doing this not the first time, but the second time, which puts him in a complete league of his own. Tell us a bit about what is to be expected of that address to the joint sitting of the Congress by the Indian Prime Minister.
Well, Saleh, let me start by saying that where I am right now, I'm inside the very room where the press conference will take place between the Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi and the US President Joe Biden. Everyone is waiting for that big press conference in which questions will be taken by the two sides. Now, several areas of convergences have occurred, including on defense, trade, on consular access, opening of consulates, and also space as well. We will see big ticket announcements being made from this very room inside the White House, and the big focus remains as to how India and the US cement their relationship further. Now, the big focus will be also on the address of the US of the Indian Prime Minister at the US Congress. He leaves from this place after the press conference to the Capitol Hill, which is a short drive from this place. And in fact, one thing I would like to point out that from the conversation when it started at the Oval House almost more than 1 hour ago, the time period, they have crossed the time limit of the bilateral which was given. So that is why everything is now essentially going into the other event which is taking place.
Absolutely, indeed. Thank you very much indeed to Siddhant Civil, to Molly Gambhir and also to Susan Tehrani for joining us and getting us all those details. This, of course, is a big moment in diplomacy between India and the United States. It's a point of inflection, as the American president defined it, because now what we're going to see are stronger ties being forged between these two nations. And it'll be very interesting to see as to the announcements that will be made in a short while from now. And also for the time being, let's also talk about something to do with a menu. And this is not any ordinary menu. This is not something that you find in a restaurant. This is the menu that has been laid out for the Indian Prime Minister during his state banquet that will have later this evening. Now, it is the state dinner menu. The White House officials are going all out for this event as well. A specially curated vegetarian meal is being prepared for the Indian Prime Minister as we speak. Now, the festivities will in fact take place on the south lawn of the White House. Even the decor has been customized to amalgamate the Indian and the American culture. So what are the dishes that will be on the menu for the Indian Prime Minister, and what's in store at the state dinner? Our next report gives you a glimpse of this.
A special plant-based menu has been curated for Indian Prime Minister Modi. Why? No points for guessing. It's because the Indian Prime Minister Modi is a devout vegetarian. This is understandable as a significant number of Indians are vegetarian. The First Lady, Jill Biden, has worked alongside the chefs to create the menu. Who are the chefs?
To introduce Chef Nina Curtis.
Guest Chef Nina Curtis.
Hello, everyone.
And White House Executive Pastry Chef Susie Morrison have tailored the menu.
As some of you may know, Prime Minister Modi is a vegetarian. So we asked Chef Nina Curtis, a plant-based pioneer, to work with our White House chefs and create a stunning vegetarian menu.
Along with the Indian PM, over 400 guests are invited for the dinner. So, what should the guests expect? What's on the menu? For the first course, there will be a marinated millet and grilled kernel salad, along with compressed watermelon and some tangy avocado sauce. For the main course, guests will be served stuffed portobello mushrooms. There will also be a creamy saffron-infused risotto. Upon request, guests can have a lemon dill yogurt sauce and summer squashes. There will also be an option to add fish to the main course. The fish dishes will include a sumac roasted sea bass. Now let's see what's for dessert. There will be a rose and cardamom-infused strawberry shortcake. But what is dinner without some wine? The state dinner will have a variety of wine for the guests. There will be a Stone Tower Chardonnay Christie 2021, a Patel Red Blend 2019, and a Domaine Carnero Brut Rosé. Although the state dinner has a stunning menu, it is just the tip of the iceberg. The First Lady worked with David Stark Design and Production to tailor the dinner's ambience. From the design of the invitations to the decor and the south lawn, designers have merged American and Indian styles. How will they give the event an Indian touch? Well, the inspiration comes from India's national bird. The White House Social Secretary Carlos Elizondo says that the inspiration for our design really began with the peacock. We wanted to evoke that breathtaking feeling when it extends its tail, unveiling its colorful beauty, majesty, and strength. The pavilion is set to be draped in rich greens with saffron flowers on every table. The design represents the colors of the Indian flag. What's for the evening entertainment? Decorated artists will be performing. They include Joshua Bell, an American violinist and conductor, the United States Marine Band Chamber Orchestra. The White House Social Secretary has said that President Biden and Prime Minister Modi will give their toasts from an eagle lectern, a ritual that leaders have done at state dinners for decades. Bureau Report, WION, World is One.
And with that, it's a wrap on this edition of the News Bulletin. But don't go anywhere. Coming up on the other side, we'll continue to track the developments as they unfold at the White House. That's coming up next. Stay tuned.
आने वाली खुशी के लिए एक ख्याल ही काफी है। ईबिक्स कैश हर खुशी के लिए काफी है। कभी कभी खुशी के लिए एक उदाहरण ही काफी है। ईबिक्स कैश हर खुशी के लिए काफी है।
WION Health Resort is unique, the only one of its kind. Experience the 4 paths of natural wellness: yoga, Ayurveda, acupuncture, and naturopathy. Each uniquely customized program improves the whole person to make every person whole. Come to WION Health Resort. Make your reservation at yowon.com.
After the collapse of the Kherson Dam and the deluge caused, fighting intensifies between the Ukrainian and the Russian forces. As the much talked about Ukrainian counter-offensive seems to be getting underway, France, Germany and Poland firm up talks on the security guarantees Ukraine desperately needs. All eyes are now on NATO leaders' July summit in the Lithuanian capital. Will it focus on Ukraine's push for accession to NATO?
Who will be the next US president? As Trump gears up to take on Biden, his deputy Pence calls him unfit. But it's DeSantis who is drumming up support. A dozen Republicans in the fray and counting. Will a crowded contest benefit Trump? Race for the White House on WION. World is One.
Gravitas tells you stories which others won't. And tonight we will tell you about this new strategic map that is being drawn.
They say your enemy's enemy is your friend. Is that the foundation of the new defense bridge between India and America?
This is what separates us from others who claim to be telling you global stories that matter. In the last 3 days, WION has been traveling across Syria. You are in Latakia city right now. Tell us, what is the situation on ground? At Gravitas, we don't just tell you stories from selected countries from around the world.
2 years since the Myanmar military coup, the people of Myanmar continue to live in a nightmare.
Because it does not suit their propaganda, or because they are too scared to speak truth to power.
Stay connected with the world through WION. Like the page on Facebook. Follow us on Twitter for new alerts. Instagram for videos and images. And the website for the latest news, views and analysis. WIONews.com. World is one.
WION Health Resort is unique, the only one of its kind. Experience the 4 paths of natural wellness: yoga, Ayurveda, acupuncture, and naturopathy. Each uniquely customized program improves the whole person to make every person whole. Come to WION Health Resort. Make your reservation at wion.com.
After the collapse of the Kherson Dam and the deluge caused, fighting intensifies between the Ukrainian and the Russian forces. As the much talked about Ukrainian counter-offensive seems to be getting underway, France, Germany and Poland firm up talks on the security guarantees Ukraine desperately needs. All eyes are now on NATO leaders' July summit in the Lithuanian capital. Will it focus on Ukraine's push for accession to NATO?
Who will be the next US president? As Trump gears up to take on Biden, his deputy Pence calls him unfit. But it's DeSantis who is drumming up support. A dozen Republicans in the fray and counting. Will a crowded contest benefit Trump? Race for the White House on WION. World is one.
Gravitas.
Welcome back to our continuous coverage of the Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi's first ever state visit to the United States of America. And just a short while from now, we expect to hear from the Indian Prime Minister and also the American President in the aftermath of the bilateral talks that they have held. And as we speak, the Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi and President Biden are speaking to each other at the White House. We'll be getting all of the details. But first, let's take a look as to what is making headlines at this hour. American President Joe Biden has hailed the defining partnership with India as he rolls out the red carpet for the Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi and goes on to describe the India-US relationship as the most defining relationship of the 21st century. And a debris field has been found by an underwater robot searching near the wreckage of the Titanic for the missing submersible on which 5 people were on board. And the United Nations has put the Russian military forces and its affiliated armed groups on its list of shame over violation of children's rights in the conflict during the war in Ukraine. When struggling with the rising inflation and the cost of living crisis, the United Kingdom has hiked its key lending rates to 5%, while Turkey has raised its lending rates to about 15% to rein in inflation. So this, of course, is the big moment. The Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi is in Washington, D.C., and as we speak, he is in the Oval Office. He's holding a bilateral conversation with the American President Joe Biden. And minutes before beginning the top-level bilateral talks, both the U.S. President and the Indian Prime Minister addressed the crowd that had gathered in the south lawns of the White House. Now, hundreds of members of the Indian-American diaspora had lined up outside of the south lawn to get a glimpse of the Indian Prime Minister. And these are live visuals that are being beamed out from inside of the White House. We expect the two leaders to in fact step up and address a joint press conference. And what is also being said is that the two leaders will also take questions from reporters. So preparations presently are underway as we expect the bilateral meeting to come to an end, or should be in its virtual last stages between the two leaders. The stage is being set. The press conference is about to begin in a few moments from now, where the Indian Prime Minister and the American President will stand side by side and will again address the media. The dignitaries and, of course, the international media is gathered there. And this, of course, is a moment, a key moment, and a defining moment in terms of how the India-US partnership will, of course, be taken forward. Because remember, the United States appears to pull off all stops in terms of how it says it wants to take the India equation forward. The American president did not mince words. He came forth and he said that this is a relationship that will define the 21st century. Those are some very, very strong words there. The United States is looking for a reliable partner, and especially considering the divergence that exists between how the United States wants to deal with China and how South European nations such as France and Germany would want to deal with China. The United States wants a reliable friend in taking on China, is how many defense and geopolitical experts had put it. And this is the reason why the United States is so actively wooing India, with all stops having been pulled off. And this is going to be an important press briefing for several reasons. Firstly, it'll be interesting to see as to what announcements will, of course, be made. But the broad outlines in terms of some of the aspects that have been spoken about are pretty much out there in the public domain. We expect something to be said in terms of the defense sector. We also expect something to be said in terms of increasing people-to-people contacts. The rules for the H-1B visas are expected to be redesigned, and this will be a big step in the diplomatic ties, because Indians apparently are the people who make use of the H-1B visa more than people of any other nationality in the world. And the process of renewing the H-1B visas is likely to be streamlined and made much more easier. And apart from this, there are several other aspects of cooperation, be it in semiconductors, be it in space, be it in sharing technologies, be it in geostrategy. All of this, of course, we will, of course, hear from the two leaders in just a bit from now. And to give us more perspective in terms of what, of course, is expected this moment, we are being joined in by my colleague Molly Gambhir, who is joining us live on this broadcast. Molly, we expect the joint press briefing to begin in a moment from now. But what we are clearly witnessing at this moment is history in the making, where stronger ties are being forged between India and the United States.
Indeed, Saleh, we are just moments away now from the key deliverables that will be taking shape as far as the India-US partnership is concerned. A huge boost for the defense cooperation is expected. After all, India and the US realizing the need that the two sides have when it comes to partnering with the other side, and the potential really that this collaboration has. No wonder then that defense deals, the expectations of defense announcements and also tech ties have been underpinning the Indian Prime Minister's maiden state visit here. The relationship has already been called among the most consequential relationships. Of course, ties between the two sides have not always been smooth sailing, but over the past decade, they have reached a transformative moment, as the US officials have been calling it, and the Indian Prime Minister's visit here has been labeled as a springboard to touch new horizons, also the lifting of barriers, which is a very significant aspect of this visit, which sends out a strong message of partnership between the two sides, and also setting new benchmarks in defense industrial cooperation. Those have been the expectations, and the US, of course, hopes to bring India further into its defense and manufacturing orbit, also hoping to wean New Delhi's military off Russia and also US supply chains of China. India also looking at the United States as a crucial partner when it comes to defense collaboration, and people-to-people ties, like you rightly pointed out, have been a very significant cornerstone of this relationship as well. And it's interesting how even when we talk about the sharing of technology and the crucial ISET, which is Initiative for Critical and Emerging Technology, that also has been called as a way to build stronger people-to-people ties, to build to deepen the trust between the two sides and bring businesses in the two countries even closer.
Absolutely, indeed, Molly. Do continue to stay on with us. Meanwhile, we're also being joined by retired Colonel David Desroches. He's joining us live in this broadcast. Now, Colonel Desroches, now this is a crucial moment, is it not? Because in terms of what the American president had to say, when he spoke at the White House, at the lawns of the White House, he said that this is a relationship that will define the 21st century. Is that your assessment as well?
Guardedly so. I mean, there's been a great desire in American policy circles going back to the Kennedy administration to have closer links with India. This narrative of the world's two most populous democracies. The fact that we have a broader range of common interests, it just seems logical that we should have a more robust partnership across a whole range of issues, not just security. It looked as though we were having a serious breakthrough in the George W. Bush administration when Washington took the lead in waiving nuclear proliferation sanctions against India. But time and time again, we've run up into various issues of inaccessibility of the market and really the persistence of what I would argue is a long dead Cold War appropriate non-alignment mentality among Indians' foreign policy elites. I think that the fact that the Chinese have actually killed Indian soldiers on Indian soil may have finally dispelled that sort of 1956 thinking. So I'm guardedly optimistic.
Absolutely. It's very interesting the way you've put it. The fact is India follows a foreign policy that caters to the interests of the Indian people. So during the Cold War, the Indian position was a principled one where India said that they do not want to take any sides when the two superpowers were having a go at each other. But now the Cold War era is over and India's foreign policy has, of course, evolved. And what we now have is a policy of strategic autonomy. Again, we don't take sides in India, but still follow a policy that is something that serves best the people of India. With that being the context, Colonel Desroches, do you see this convergence? Because the United States is quite clearly looking for allies here. Because in terms of how the Europeans want to deal with China, in terms of the equation that the Europeans want to have with China, for instance, Germany and France have divergence in terms of how they view their relation to China vis-a-vis the United States. And therefore, the United States is looking for a reliable partner to, in fact, take on the Chinese threat. Is that the reason why the two nations are moving closer to each other?
It's part of the reason, and I would argue that the clinging to non-alignment has not served India's interests, but that's another argument. Japan, or countries like France and
Colonel
Germany.
I just need to interject there because we see the Indian Prime Minister and the American President just stepping up to the lectern there. We expect the joint press briefing. Let's in fact listen to what is being said at the White House there.
And the Prime Minister, I know you've got to get up to Capitol Hill very soon and to address the joint session to Congress. It's a testament to the strong and enduring and thoroughly bipartisan support that exists all across the United States for the friendship and partnership between India and the United States that they're anxiously waiting to hear you up on Capitol Hill. A partnership that is among the most consequential in the world, that is stronger, closer, and more dynamic than any time in history. Mr. Prime Minister, we've met many times over the past few years, most recently in Hiroshima at the G7 summit, and each time I was struck by our ability to find new areas of cooperation. Together, we're unlocking the shared future of what I believe to be unlimited potential. And with this visit, we're demonstrating once more how India and the United States are collaborating on nearly every human endeavor and delivering progress across the board. From designing new ways to diagnose and treat illnesses like cancer and diabetes, to collaborating on human spaceflight, including sending an Indian astronaut to the International Space Station in 2024, to accelerating a global clean energy transition and tackling the climate crisis we face, to harnessing our shared expertise on critical and emerging technologies like quantum computing and artificial intelligence, to ensuring they are not used as tools of misinformation and oppression. We are doubling down on our cooperation to secure our semiconductor supply chains, advancing Open RAN telecommunications networks, and growing our major defense partnership with the more joint exercises, more cooperation between our defense industries, and more consultation and coordination across all domains. Our economic relationship is booming. Trade between our countries has almost doubled over the past decade to more than $191 billion, supporting tens of thousands of good jobs in both India and the United States. Add to that, 1 million American jobs across 44 states will be supported by the purchase of more than 200 American-made Boeing aircraft by that Air India is announcing earlier this year. And with this visit, Indian firms are announcing more than $2 billion in new investments in manufacturing, solar in Colorado, steel in Ohio, and optic fiber in South Carolina, and much more. Further proof that America's manufacturing is back. We're expanding educational exchanges for our students, building on the record 125,000 student visas for Indians to study in the United States we issued last year, and opening new consulates that's going to make it easier for our people to travel, work, and collaborate together. On the issues that matter most and that will define the future, our nations look to one another, including on critical regional and global issues. And today, we also talked about our shared efforts to mitigate the humanitarian tragedies unleashed by Russia's brutal war in Ukraine and to defend the core principles of the UN Charter's sovereignty and territorial integrity. We discussed our work through the Quad and how India and the United States, together with Australia and Japan, can ensure the vital Indo-Pacific region remains free, open, prosperous, and secure. Through our new I2U2 grouping with Israel and the UAE, we're building regional connections to the Middle East and spurring science-based solutions to global challenges like food security and clean energy. And this year, under India's leadership of the G20, we're putting sustainable development at the center of the agenda. We're delivering meaningful action on low and middle-income nations, including multilateral development bank reform, debt relief, and building resilient and equitable health systems. The bottom line is simple. We want people everywhere to have the opportunity to live in dignity. And let me close with this. Indians and Americans are both peoples who innovate and create, turn obstacles into opportunities, who find strength in community and family, and who cherish freedom and celebrate the democratic values of universal human rights, which face challenges around the world and in each of our countries, but which remain so vital to the success of each of our nations. Press freedom, religious freedom, tolerance, diversity. India now has the most populous country, is now the most populous country in the world. It's a democracy. We understand that it is the brilliance and the backbone of our people, as diverse and talents and traditions that make us strong as a nation. It's democracies that do that. We see that so clearly here in the United States, where a vibrant Indian American community of more than 4 million strong contributes every single day to the writing of the future of our nation. Indian Americans of every background and faith, representing the full diversity of India, are pursuing their American dream while maintaining deep connections for their Indian heritage and families. That makes us all stronger. That is a cornerstone of this essential partnership between India and the United States. And that is why I know the friendship between our nations is only going to grow as we face the future together. Mr. Prime Minister, the floor is yours.
Your Excellency,
Your Excellency, President Biden,
दोनों देशों के
delegates of both countries, friends from the media, Namaskar. First of all, I thank President Biden for his warm words and for his positive views on India-America relations. Friends, today is a day that has special importance in the history of India-America relations. Our discussions today and the important decisions we have taken have added a new chapter to our comprehensive and a global strategic partnership. They have given it a new direction and a new energy. Friends, a trade and investment partnership between India and America is important not only for our two countries, but for the global economy as well. Today, America is India's biggest trade partner. We have decided to resolve long pending trade-related issues and make a new beginning. The initiative for critical and emerging technologies, ICET, has emerged as an important framework for our technical cooperation. By increasing our cooperation in fields such as artificial intelligence, semiconductors, space, quantum, and telecom, we are creating a strong and futuristic partnership. The decision taken by American companies such as Micron, Google, and Applied Materials to invest in India symbolizes this futuristic partnership. During this journey, I also had the opportunity to meet some other American CEOs, and in my discussions with them, I could feel their enthusiasm and their positive views about India. We both agree that to make our strategic technology partnership meaningful, it is very important that governments, businesses, and academic institutions come together in order to implement India and America's shared vision on clean energy transition. We have taken several important initiatives. These cover areas such as green hydrogen, wind energy, battery storage, and carbon capture. We have also decided that in the midst of global uncertainties, India and America will, as trusted partners, create reliable, secure, and resilient global supply chains and value chains as well. The close defense cooperation between India and America symbolizes our mutual trust and shared strategic priorities. Moving away from the old buyer-seller relationship we had earlier, we have transitioned today to a relationship involving transfer of technology, co-development, and co-production. The decision taken by General Electric to manufacture engines in India through transfer of technology is a landmark agreement. This also opens up new job opportunities in both countries. This will give our defense cooperation a new character in the times to come. The defense industries and startups of both countries are important partners in this cooperation. Bringing them together is the key objective of our defense industrial roadmap. In the area of space science and technologies, we have had long-standing cooperation.
By taking the decision to join the Artemis Accords, we have taken a big leap forward in our space cooperation. In fact, in short, for India and America partnership, even the sky is not the limit. Friends, the most important pillar of our relations is our people-to-people ties. More than 4 million people of Indian origin today make significant contribution to the progress of America. In fact, just this morning, the large number of Indians that gathered at the White House demonstrates that the Indian Americans, in fact, are the real strength behind our relations. In order to further deepen these relations, we welcome America's decision to open consulates in Bengaluru and Ahmedabad. Similarly, we will also open a new Indian consulate in Seattle. Friends, in our meeting today, we discussed several regional and global issues. Peace and security in the Indo-Pacific is our common priority. We agree that the development and success of this region is important for the entire world. We shared our views to enhance coordination with all countries in this region along with our Quad partners. India and America stand shoulder to shoulder in the fight against terrorism and fundamentalism. we were in agreement that concrete actions are needed in order to end cross-border terrorism. The COVID pandemic and the Ukraine conflict have afflicted the countries of the Global South in particular. We believe that in order to resolve these problems, it is absolutely imperative for all countries to unite. From the very beginning of the events in Ukraine, India has laid emphasis on resolution of dispute through dialogue and diplomacy. We are completely ready to contribute in any way we can to restore peace. Under India's G20 presidency, we are laying emphasis on the spirit of one earth, one family, one future. We are lending a voice to the priorities of the Global South. I thank President Biden that he has expressed support to my proposal of giving the African Union full membership of the G20. Friends, the core philosophy of all of our collective efforts is to strengthen democracy and democratic values and democratic order. Two of the world's largest democracies, India and America, can together make an important contribution to global peace, stability, and prosperity. I'm confident that based on these values, we will be able to fulfill the expectations and aspirations of not only the people of our two countries, but of the entire world. President Biden, thank you for the meaningful discussion today. This year, during the G20 summit, we are looking forward to welcoming you. This is myself, and all of India is looking forward to welcoming you to India. And as President has said, I do have another engagement after this. I need to address the Congress, so I do not want to take any more time. And I am going to stop here. Once again, President Biden, thank you very much.
Well, the Congress is actually waiting to, and anxiously waiting to hear you. I'm told there are two questioners, Sabrina from the Wall Street Journal and Kumar from the Trust of India. And Sabrina, you first.
Thank you, Mr. President. I have a question for the Prime Minister, but first a two-part question for you. Your comments at a fundraiser this week appear to be the first time in recent memory that a sitting U.S. president has called a Chinese leader a dictator. Did those comments about President Xi undermine or complicate the progress your administration has made in maintaining a relationship with China? And secondly, on India, as you raise these broader issues of human rights and democracy, what is your message to those, including some members of your own party, who say that your administration is overlooking the targeting of religious minorities and crackdown on dissent in Prime Minister Modi's country?
The answer to your first question is no. When we're talking to our allies and partners around the world, including India, we let the idea of my choosing and avoiding saying what I think is the facts with regard to the relationship with India, with China, is just not something I'm going to change very much. I think I believe that, and I've said this for some time, that the hysteria about the relationship with China is collapsing and moving, et cetera, we had an incident that caused some confusion, you might say. But the Secretary Blinken had a great trip to China. I expect to be meeting with President Xi sometime in the future, in the near term, and I don't think it's had any real consequence. And what was your second question?
So as you raise these broader issues of human rights and democracy, what is your message to those, including some members of your own party, who believe that your administration is overlooking the targeting of religious minorities and a crackdown on dissent in India?
Well, look, the Prime Minister and I had a good discussion about democratic values, and that's the nature of our relationship. We're straightforward with each other, and we respect each other. One of the fundamental reasons that I believe the U.S.-China relationship is not in the space it is in the U.S.-Indian relationship is that there's an overwhelming respect for each other because we're both democracies. And it's a common democratic character of both our countries and our people, our diversity, our culture, our open, tolerant, robust debate. And I believe that we believe in the dignity of every citizen. And it is in America's DNA, and I believe in India's DNA, that the whole world has a stake in our success, both of us, in maintaining our democracies, makes us appealing partners, and enables us to expand democratic institutions around the world. And I believe this, and I still believe this.
Mr. Prime Minister, India has long prided itself as the world's largest democracy, but there are many human rights groups who say that your government has discriminated against religious minorities and sought to silence its critics. As you stand here in the east room of the White House, where so many world leaders have made commitments to protecting democracy, what steps are you and your government willing to take to improve the rights of Muslims and other minorities in your country and to uphold free speech?
I'm actually really surprised that people say so and so. People don't say it. Indeed, India is a democracy. And as President Biden also mentioned, India and America, both countries, democracy is in our DNA. Democracy is our spirit. Democracy runs in our veins. We live democracy, and our ancestors have actually put words to this concept, and that is in the form of our Constitution. Our government has taken the basic principles of democracy, and on that basis our constitution is made, and the entire country runs on that. Our constitution and our government, we have always proved that democracy can deliver. And when I say deliver, this is regardless of caste, creed, religion, gender. There's absolutely no space for discrimination. And when you talk of democracy, if there are no human values and there is no humanity, there are no human rights, then it's not a democracy. And that is why when you say democracy and you accept democracy, and when we live democracy, then there is absolutely no space for discrimination. And that is why India believes in moving ahead with everybody we trust and with everybody's efforts. These are our foundation principles, which are the basis of how we operate, how we live our lives. In India, the benefits that are provided by the government is accessible to all. Whoever deserves those benefits is available to everybody. And that is why in India's democratic values, there is absolutely no discrimination, neither on basis of caste, creed, or age, or any kind of geographic location.
Kumar.
Yeah, thanks a lot, sir. Sir, my question is on the issue of climate change. Both countries have spoken strongly about the need to tackle the climate change, but there is a view. Both countries have spoken about the challenge of climate change, but there is a view that ambitious targets are set, but implementation is found often lacking. And there is also a criticism of lack of technological transfer, financial transfer from the developed countries to the developing nations. How do you both leaders see the way ahead on this pressing issue?
Well, first of all, I think it is the existential threat to humanity, climate change. It's the most serious problem we face as human beings. We have to keep it below 1.5 degrees Celsius. We've made enormous progress here in the United States on dealing with this issue by doing three things. Number one, by insisting that we move every one of our industries into a position where they can take advantage of cheaper and more extensive and more available renewable energy, whether it's solar or wind or hydrogen and green hydrogen. There's a whole range of things we've been working on. In addition to that, we find ourselves in a position that what we've done is that we have significantly reduced for example, I made a commitment that we were going to make sure that by 2030, 30% of all our land and sea and oceans were in conservation, could not be developed. We're well on our way to doing that, and that's also absorbing carbon from the air as a consequence of that because of the conservation. We are in a position as well that we have provided for significant increase in funding for a whole range of issues, but not just for the United States, but for the rest of the world. For example, we're working with the G7 to provide for infrastructure work for dealing with global warming on the continent of Africa. In Angola, building the largest solar project, moving ourselves, having railway to go all the way across the southern from the Atlantic Ocean to the Indian Ocean in Africa, to be able to transport and do it cheaper and do it with less, how can I say it, less carbon emissions. We're trying to work with other countries to maintain their carbon sinks so they don't have to develop them like we did in causing pollution. And we're trying to figure out how to work out to pay them not to develop certain areas like the Amazon and Brazil. But there's a lot of technology that's available that we're sharing and we share with one another. We've learned how to do solar energy, which is considerably cheaper than it is for fossil fuels. The same way dealing with not just solar, but dealing with wind. And so there's a lot of technology that we've developed, and we're well on our way, I think, to meeting the commitment we made that we made in Paris. And we're prepared to share all of that with India that has a desire to do the same.
Excellency, you said very rightly that as far as India is concerned, the environment, climate, these are extremely important in our cultural traditions. For us, the environment is an article of faith. This is not just something that we need to do for convenience. We believe this. We do not believe in the exploitation of nature. In order for all of creation to work, we can make nature, but we cannot have exploitation of nature. And we have always believed this. And on the basis of these values, we are not only doing things for ourselves, but are taking some global initiatives as well. You perhaps know that the G20 countries, the promises they made in Paris, of all the G20 countries, India is the only country that has fulfilled all the promises it made at the G20. Not just that, in the area of solar energy in Glasgow, we had set ourselves the target to achieve 500 gigawatts of renewable energy. By 2030, we have set ourselves the target to make Indian Railways net zero. And you must understand the scale of Indian Railways. When we talk about Indian Railways, it means that every day the entire population of Australia travels in our wagons, in our railway wagons, on our trains. And we have set ourselves the target to achieve net zero for our railways. We have also set ourselves targets for solar energy, for ethanol, 10% mix of ethanol. We have completed this target before the set date. We are also working in the area of green hydrogen. We want India to be a green hydrogen hub, and we are working towards this. In the International Solar Alliance has been launched by India, and many countries have joined it and are working with India. The island countries, we have helped them in the area of solar energy so that they have now got a new confidence that we are with them in their efforts to fight climate change. And we will not only fulfill our responsibilities, but we will also help you in the area of climate change. We have seen that due to natural calamities, people talk about the death of people, no doubt, when there are natural disasters, but there is a lot of destruction of infrastructure as well. And therefore, because of climate change, the kind of crisis we are feeling, we need to develop infrastructure that is resilient. And therefore, we have created a global organization called CDRI. And you perhaps know that in Glasgow, I presented a subject to the world, and recently it was launched by the UN Secretary General and myself. That is Mission Life, and when I say life, I mean lifestyle for the environment. Therefore, every individual must live his life in a pro-environment, pro-development way, and we are working towards this. And I am sure that whatever work India has started in all these areas, not because India has adversely affected the environment of the world. We are doing this because we have a concern for future generations. We do not want to give our future generations a world that make life difficult for them. And therefore, as a global responsibility, India has not caused any problems to the environment. However, we are playing a leading role in contributing in a positive manner as far as prosperous countries are concerned. There's always been talk about technology transfer, financial support, and there are some countries that need to have technology transfer, financial support, and we hope that as soon as we can move forward in this area, we will be able to solve this challenge of climate change. Thank you very much.
We have caused damage in the United States the way we developed over the last 300 years. And that's why I was able to convince my colleagues in the Congress to pass legislation, the largest climate fund ever in American and in world history, $369 billion. $369 billion to deal with the climate crisis. And we're doing it extensively now, and I think you're going to see significant progress. Thank you all very, very much.
All right, so that was the joint press briefing and also the press conference in which both leaders took some pretty hard questions and answered about a couple of important issues. And this, remember, has been a bilateral meeting between the Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi and also the American President Joe Biden. And it went on for well over an hour. And there were a lot of issues that have been discussed, be it in terms of defense cooperation, be it in terms of increasing people-to-people contact, and we expect a whole host of different agreements which probably could fructify as a reason in the aftermath of these bilateral talks. It will now be very interesting to see as to how this relationship progresses from here. Now, just the optics of what is being said and what is coming through is very interesting. Because the Indian Prime Minister is, of course, on his first ever state visit to the United States of America. The United States is actively looking for allies as it tries to take on China, which has been pretty belligerent and is threatening the American position of being the numero uno nation in terms of its economy and its military power in the nation at this moment, which is why the United States is actively looking for partners, with allies with whom it can team itself in, which is also the reason why, as to the American president, as to why the American president Joe Biden went on to define and describe the India-US relationship as the relationship that will define the 21st century. Now, it remains to be seen as to how things will, of course, progress from here. And the Indian Prime Minister took a couple of questions from the reporters who were gathered at the White House there. He spoke about a couple of important two issues as to how India continues to remain such an important and a vibrant democracy despite the few niggles and the few challenges that of course, India faces at the moment. But an important milestone nonetheless. And this of course, is a great and an important visit by the Indian Prime Minister in the United States of America. And my colleague Molly Gambhir, of course, is joining us live on this broadcast. Molly, we just heard from the two leaders there, and we expect more details, of course, will emerge in terms of what, of course, happens from here. But this is an important relationship that is being forged, that is being taken forward by the Indian Prime Minister as a part of his very first state visit to the United States of America.